This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. This last episode of the year is the perfect time to take a look back and highlight some of the important conversations that we have had over the past 52 weeks. It's been quite a year, and despite some of the headwinds facing the broader brewing business, it remains true that the quality of beer being made now in North America and around the world is better than it has ever been in the history of beer. Today, brewers have more access to high-quality ingredients than ever, more tools for making interesting beers at any scale, and access to the shared brewing knowledge base that would have made brewers shocked and jealous just 10 or 15 years ago. I have grown more conscious of our role in that this year. The conversations we share and magazine issues we produce reach brewers all around the world, and it was incredible, just really incredible this year to map out more of those connections, like the small craft brewer on the island of Roatan in Honduras who listens to the podcast, or the beachfront brewery in Thailand that proudly showed off their copies of the magazine when Joe Steng visited earlier this year, and of course our avid listeners and readers in New Zealand, Quebec and Alberta, Canada, Antwerp, Belgium, so many more. I spent 70 days on the road this year, not quite as much as last year, but I mean, that's about 20% of my calendar. And of course, Ashley Carter of Bierstadt Lagerhouse got me this Flighty app, or got me using the Flighty app this year, so I could actually give you all of my detailed stats on travel. 43 flights, over 66,000 miles on planes, 2.7 times around the Earth, 6 days and 17 hours in flight, 25 hours alone just taxiing in planes, 22 different airports, 7 countries this year. United States, also Canada a couple of times, New Zealand, France, Germany, Belgium, and even a very small stint in the Netherlands that you'll hear about in another episode a couple weeks from now. For beer, I know my tracking wasn't quite as good. Didn't do it as tightly as I have in the past. There probably didn't log 700 or so beers that I wrote reviews of for the magazine, but Untappd shows it at over 1,100 beers this year, 152 different styles, American IPA being my most consumed. The beer I drank more than any other was La Cumbre Elevated IPA from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then Westbound IPA and Westbound Select were right behind it. Slow Pour Pils and Odell IPA finished out my personal most drunk top 5. But one thing was consistent throughout the year, and that is trying to overcome my own biases, be open to new experiences. If you were to ask me what beer I'd like to try, I will always respond with a question back to you. And that question is, what are you really excited about right now? If you're excited about it, I want to know more about it, and I'd love to taste it. In the words of the immortal Ted Lasso, be curious, not judgmental. Always be open to these new experiences. For the podcast overall, it was a great year. We deeply appreciate the continued support of all of our sponsors, and so many are continuing their support in 2026, along with a few new ones. Kind of wild to be entering the new year almost fully sold out for the podcast. But hey, thank you for listening, because you are the ones that make that all possible. I'll throw some more things in throughout the year. This episode, the whole point is to count down our most listened to episodes, those episodes that were most valuable to you, that you shared the most, that you listened to the most, you listened again to the most, whatever those reasons are, driving those higher download numbers. We're going to count them down here. So if you didn't listen to them throughout the year, hey, here's some good reason to go back in and listen once again, or listen for the very first time. Let's jump into the top 10 for the year, computed and adjusted not only by total downloads, but also downloads per day. You know, we try to unskew our bias towards episodes from earlier in the year. There were a couple this fall that really shot up and found their way into this top 10, and we are going to highlight those. But before we do, for years, G&T Chillers has chilled the beers you love, partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across North America and beyond. They're proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years, because brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, and nor do they. They use quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation And with their 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all the information you need, and gain peace of mind your operation is running smoothly. And Berkeley Yeast just launched Dry Tropics London, their best-selling liquid yeast strain, now with all the ease-of-use benefits of dry yeast. Dry Tropics London delivers the soft, pillowy mouthfeel and juicy character you'd expect from a top-tier London ale strain, but with a serious upgrade, a burst of thiols that unleash vibrant, layered notes of grapefruit and passion fruit. A lot of brewers love the clean passion fruit you get from Tropics, but they don't want every IPA to be a tropical fruit bomb. At the dry yeast price point, you can pitch and ditch without breaking the bank, or you can co-pitch with your house strain to adjust the intensity of the notes. And with nationwide free shipping, there's never been a better time to try Dry Tropics. Order now at berkeleyyeast.com and experience the ease and impact of Dry Tropics London yeast. Also, every beer menu could use a refresh button on the fruit flavors. That's why it's time to revisit Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends, where the latest additions include fruit punch, guava, kiwi, and pomegranate, but they aren't stopping there and welcome flavor suggestions from the brewing industry. More information and free samples are waiting at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. First up in our top 10 countdown is an episode that I recorded back in New Zealand with Dr. Peter Burcham of Garage Project on the myths and realities of biotransformation. Let's take a listen.
It's an interesting term. I guess it's a buzzword, and it's a weird kind of word because yeast is doing way more biotransformation than what we think of as these like one little flavor things. I guess it's more hop biotransformation would make more sense.
So what do you mean by that? What other biotransformation is happening there through fermentation?
Well, pretty all the fermentation, right? They're taking sugar and they're transforming it into alcohol is a big one. The one that I'm really focused on at the moment, which I guess is also biotransformation, is in the non-alcoholic space. I think the biggest problem, at least for craft brewers who are using yeast-based technologies, is that you usually have these worty off flavors. And in a normal fermentation, you've got the yeast that will have all these worty aldehydes that have come in from the malt, and they're going to transform those into things like the alcohol counterpart, which is less aromatic, and you notice it less, so you don't have that worty off flavor. I mean, that's the same sort of thing. It's just an enzyme doing this conversion, biotransformation, and it's lacking in most of the non-alcoholic strains. Even if people tell you that they've got good activity, it's not the same as your full alcoholic fermentation, right? So there's a whole scope for that to be improved, I think. But in general, when people are talking about biotransformation, they're thinking of flavor conversions, and mostly around freeing thiols at the moment. Although I guess a few years back, terpene glycoside release was probably the bigger one that people were talking about.
Terpene glycoside release. Tell me more about that.
That one is similar to the thiols. You've got terpenes. They're the aromas that we're after, volatile compounds. For thiols, you have them conjugated to either cysteine or glutathione, and that's their bound form. They're no longer volatile. Terpenes are bound to a sugar, and that's called a terpene glycoside. And a similar thing, you've got another enzyme which can cleave that glycoside off. You've got the free aroma, and then you're releasing this trapped aroma. So yeast can do that as well. And I think it was a much bigger topic earlier. I mean, now definitely the focus on thiols. There's probably been more developed, and I think probably most brewing strains are probably more capable of that to some extent than the thiols. Just as it happens from whatever selection processes have happened in the history of beer, most strains are just really bad at releasing thiols, and maybe that's why it gets more attention as well, because there's a bigger scope to try and develop and manipulate these.
Right now, if we want to really go terpene and in any kind of direction, there are isolated terpene monoterpenes. There are terpene blends that are rebuilt out of various sources. Both hop and other natural ingredient derived that are map out GC spikes of popular flavors to kind of create the same expression through that way. Like we can throw terpenes. Like now we have this kind of isolated terpene technology that doesn't depend necessarily just on fermentation.
Yeah, and even with hops themselves, right? There's a lot of varietals out there that have a huge amount of free terpenes anyway. And I think for a longer time, people have had a better handle on that because they are easier to measure. So there's way more research out where people have measured these kind of things. Thiols are much harder to measure, and that's probably why it's a more recent thing that people are really looking into these.
Good stuff from Dr. Peter Burcham of Garage Project. The number 10th most listened to spot. For the number 9 spot, we go to Louisville, Kentucky, and Spencer Guy, then head brewer, now co-owner of Atrium Brewing in Louisville, talking about building components for blending barrel-aged stout.
Yeah, so for our sweeter components, we have different barrels sitting around. I want some dry beer in barrels. I want some sweet beer in barrels. I want some high alcohol stuff in barrels. I want some low alcohol stuff in barrels. But for the sweeter components, we always run a reiterated mash. So I know plenty of guys who will they'll do 2 mashes and they'll just collect first runnings from both mashes. I've kind of come up with this kind of wacky way that we do things. So for the first mash, I'll just grain in like 1,000 pounds of 2-row and nothing else. We'll do like the smallest amount of acid there to get it in the pH range for conversion, but like at the high end of conversion, at the high end of the pH range. So like maybe 5.8, 5.6 maybe. And the reason we want that to be so high is because we're fully sparging that 2-row. We're collecting the wort in our kettle. We're holding our kettle at strike temperature with the wort, and then we're coming in the next day. We're using that wort as strike water for the stout. So, we have all this roasted stuff in the stout recipe the next day, and we know that that's going to drop the pH like pretty crazy. So we really want the pH of this wort that we're striking with to be a little bit higher so that the pH of the mash is not like dropping too crazy down. So yeah, we'll take that wort, we'll use it as strike water. We'll grain in the stout, and then we will sparge that.
And that's sitting overnight at that kind of temperature, at that kind of pH, and you don't have any issues with it.
No, correct. So I used to do it all in the same day. So I'd take that, I'd do that first mash, collect all the wort, get it up to strike temp, and then grain in all over again. And then it was actually during a collaboration with the Moore guys out of Chicago. I was talking to them, and I was like, man, like, you guys see any problem with me leaving this wort at 180 degrees overnight? Like, I couldn't find an issue with it. They agreed. Like, I don't think there's going to be an issue there. So that's kind of when we started the process of just not overexerting ourselves on that first day. We can set our burner to kick on and off overnight. So typically strike these things super hot anyway, so we can hold that thing at 180 degrees. Nothing's going to happen to it overnight, and it's ready to grain in with the next morning.
And so where do you go from there?
So from there, we, obviously run boil off and we do sparge a bit with hot liquor there. It's not just first runnings. There's so much sugar left in that grain bed when you're using wort as the strike water. Typically that strike wort is around, 1070, 1080. Sorry, I don't speak Plato the best. And then so, as far as like target original gravity there, where, you're shooting in the dark a little bit. It was like, what are you aiming for here? It's like, well, we're aiming for whatever we can get, really. So once we get that sparge done and we get collected pre-boil, we'll take a pre-boil sample and make a call on if we think that we want to add some brewer's crystals or if we think we want to add some DME. Typically we don't need it. And typically doing the reiterated mash, we don't need the crazy long extended boil either. We're getting these super, super high Plato wort without having to sit and boil for 8 hours because of this reiterated mash process.
That was Spencer Guy of Atrium in the number 9 spot. In the number 8 spot, we go to Issaquah, Washington, and Jesse Brown of Formula, talking about his medal-winning approach to frontside decoction.
Talk a little bit about mashing process here. My pale lagers that I make here are all single decocted.
Okay.
I do have a mash mixer that is jacketed. Everything is a high pressure steam system, which is really convenient.
High pressure steam.
Yeah, it's not. You don't see a lot of 15 barrel brew houses that have high pressure steam. I wasn't here to do the build out, but I'm not upset about that at all. It runs hard, and I had to like pull it back, throttle it back quite a bit to keep it where I want it for boils and whatnot. But all my pale lagers are single decoction, but I do what I call a front side decoction, where I only mash 33% in, do all the steps, do the decoction, then I'll bring in the other bit of the mash to go through another sack rest and another step and then another mash out. And it takes more time, right? It's a lot of time, but I was struggling with, I don't have a way to bring the mash back and forth from my mash tun to my lauter tun, which I had in Nashville at Little Harpeth Brewing. So I had to get creative about how I wanted to do the decoction.
So you do a full, first mash step and then boil after that first mash step.
I go through 3 steps.
3 steps.
Yeah, 3 steps. I come in.
Walk me through that.
Well, yeah, it's not, I don't think it's all that unique. Like I come in at 134, 135, 5 minutes. I don't want to be there very long. I think that if you stay low for too long, you can have foam problems. You can have fermentation problems as far as finishing. I want my beers to finish dry and have a healthy fermentation. So I want to get up to that 146 to 149 range and rest. I give a longer rest to my beers than some of my other friends do, because I think it helps build more malt depth. And then I get up to
you say longer out. How much longer?
I mean, I'm an hour
on
my sack rest. That's really long. I know people will simply say, well, this is modern. Modern malt converts 20 minutes, 30 minutes ish, maybe. And it does, right? You stay in it, you'll know it is. I still think that there's better malt depth to be gained, not by going fast, but by going slow. That's something that I think that throughout a lot of the beers that I make here is that I kind of have a slow down to make better beer mentality. And it's definitely helped me with lager beer. I know most people don't have the luxury of time and the luxury to take their time, but I think it helps the beers.
It makes for a long day if you're having long mash rests like that. So then at what point there, do you then start boiling that?
Well, yeah, I'll go through 3 steps and then I'll go through the sack rest and go up to 156, 158 and do another 10, 15 minutes there. And then I will go ahead and go up to boiling. The boils are short. For these pale lagers, I've messed around with times from 2 minutes to 15 minutes, and I'm pretty happy in the 8 minute range. But I've been happy with 2 to 5 minutes on some of these. I'm always tweaking. I'm always playing around with them. But I do think adding that decoction step.
I was talking to Eric Toft about just how short his, those are very short decoctions.
And some of my tricks come from Eric. Eric's a Wyoming boy.
I did that interview with him in Blacktooth in Cheyenne. So yes, I do know that. His dad was right there too.
His dad, that's how I met him. He came to Altitude when I was the brewer there. And
we've met Ed Zwei a number of times for beers when he's in town. So
I've been fortunate enough to be at Schoenraum drinking beer with him as well in the last few years. And so I've kind of full circle to kind of get to experience those beers. But
shorter decoctions.
Shorter decoctions. It's just more depth. When you're talking about these pale beers, Pilsner malts, you really got to eke out more character, and whatever your brew house can give you, you're looking for that advantage and a way to get that character. And that's what I found works really well here in our little brew house.
Character, what are you describing? Like what kind of character per se? And I think, I know what I would call it, because you're looking for this kind of like a bit more body and fullness without the sweetness. So you're trying to accomplish both of those things in this one step.
Right. How do you massage out all the grain character, husk character, without getting it astringent? Right. I can taste those beers when I'm like, wow, that's really husky, that's really astringent. I think that there is a level that boiling your mash is going to give you a soft character. So to everything that you're just beating up.
That was Jesse Brown of Formula in that number 8 spot for the year. And the number 7 spot, we go to Salt Lake City. Nope, that's Park City, Utah. To be more specific, Connor Brown talking about building body in lower ABV IPAs. But first, give your customers a pleasant surprise with Audacia in your next IPA. Brought to you by Indie Hops, this descendant of Strata brings her own flair of catchy lilac lavender aroma and flavors of sweet tart berries with tangy lychee. Audacia loves family reunions with Strata and has even more fun when Citra, Simcoe, Amarillo, and others join the party. Let Audacia loose and watch the smiles spread. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. And looking for a powerful no-rinse sanitizer that gets the job done fast? Meet SaniClean PAA Pro from 5 Star Chemicals. This EPA-registered PAA-based acid sanitizer is tough on beer stone and perfect for everything from kegs to packaging lines. Available in 2 convenient sizes, it's ideal for coarse sprayers, fermenters, and more. Trusted by pros, designed for performance, SaniClean PAA Pro helps you brew with confidence. Learn more at 5starchemicals.com. Brew better. Brew with 5 Star. Also, this episode is sponsored by PackTech, delivering craft beer multi-packing you can trust. PackTech's handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable, helping breweries close the loop and advance the circular economy. With a minimalist design, durable functionality you can rely on, and custom color matching, PackTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. Trusted by craft brewers nationwide, they offer a smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. To learn more, visit packtech-opi.com. That's PAKTECH-OPI.com. Now, Connor from Offset.
Yeah, the waters, we, usually calcium targets are 120, 100, 125, sometimes as much as 150.
Calcium, this is the second week in a row that we've been talking about calcium and the importance of it.
Yeah, no, it's obviously for yeast health and
sure.
But it also, obviously with calcium comes the other ions. We used to be a lot more chloride heavy. We've switched to be a little bit more sulfate heavy. But also I'm a big believer in sodium as well, especially for lower ABV beers. I think we don't really push it too far. I think Target is generally...
you're here right outside of Salt Lake City, so...
yeah, funny how that works.
Guess it makes it local, right?
Yeah, and actually, I think the water in Salt Lake does have actually a little bit more sodium in it, but we're generally targeting like 50 to 70 ppm on the sodium side of things. Obviously, chloride comes along with that as well, but I think it does give the beer a little bit more fullness to the palate, a little bit more heft. Again, something I kind of did early on and we've literally do for not every beer, but for a lot of the beers, especially the IPAs that we make that are 5%. But yeah, we tend to be a little bit more sulfate heavy now.
Why the change?
I think, for me, always the best resources for water were Greg Noonan's books, especially the second one, the New Brewing Lager Beer. And he always said something, and I remember especially around
it's so polarizing.
Yeah, the water.
I love talking to American brewers now. Greg Noonan's book, it was great, and yet
totally. But for me, that was the best. I literally
the challenge of all educational resources, right? The danger is that they then create a monoculture, based on those resources. And so, what he's saying isn't incorrect. It's just that there's also other ways that create character difference,
Yeah, for sure. But I read the water book before I even homebrewed beer. I've probably read it, I don't know how many times.
That's properly nerdy.
Very nerdy, for sure. But I knew it was really, really, really important. Obviously, 95% of the ingredients, it's incredibly important. And so, but his actually, reading his philosophy a little bit on water and on a little bit on palate as well, but texture components of water was really eye-opening. And I definitely remember around 2017, 2018, there was all these New England IPAs, hazy IPAs that were just so chalky, that had just so much of that chalky residual, especially the back of the palate. And, I learned that, and again, reading Noonan's book that's oftentimes as a result of chloride in combination with lots of calcium. So it's not actually the chloride levels, it's actually the high chloride levels essentially with high calcium levels. And so we kind of go back and forth a little bit. We try and add more of the minerality to the mash and a little bit less to the kettle. We kind of go back and forth sometimes. I think obviously as you're adding it in the kettle, you're losing less of it. So more of it's making it into the final beer. But I just felt like the higher chloride levels I just didn't like how it was sort of sitting on the palate. It just maybe lingered a little bit too long. So we actually did a complete 180 one day and just tried it as, Dopo is a perfect example. We literally brew it once or twice a week, and there's not one variable that doesn't get messed with at least, almost every time we make it, just because it's so great to have, we'll have 3 or 4 batches in the brewery at once and can really just do the comparison back and forth. So yeah, we switched to sulfate. I think it just had a little bit better, just didn't linger on the palate as long, a little bit drier, a little bit brighter overall hop character. So we lean a little bit higher in sulfate, try and target definitely a little higher, I think, than most people maybe would for a 5%. So are you
saying
beer?
You're making yours a little more West Coast hazy? Is that what you're saying?
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
Here's the cellar maker thing. Well, here we are again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think, again, I try not to define the beers. I'm just trying to make what I think is the best IPA. Generally at 5%, I feel like having some haze helps again with mouthfeel and with texture and with heft. We're going to trying to do a little bit more West Coast inspired clearer one coming up. But pretty much most of the ones we've made do have some level of haze to them. Yes.
Well, if you put enough hops in them, they're going to be hazy, right?
No, exactly. We're not trying to make them hazy. We're just not trying to make them clear.
Connor Brown of Offset Brewing in Park City, Utah, on the Lie IPA, as he calls them. Up next, we go down to New Zealand with Pavel Lewandowski and a little discussion on New Zealand Pilsner.
Most brewers for New Zealand Pilsners, they're using Nelson Saff, Motueka, Riwaka. That's the golden ratio, I think, golden triangle to goes for a New Zealand Pilsner. And I don't think so you can go wrong with those. You can use in a different ratio, obviously. For us, we have bittering addition. We start from Pacific Jade as a higher alpha acids hop, so it gives you like nice rounded bitterness. We chuck it for a 70 minutes boil before even it started boiling, so we call it like first wort, right? I found it that bitterness is more rounded in a higher pH. And then we adding towards the end of the boil a 10 minutes addition, around 3 grams of hops per liter, equal part of Motueka and Riwaka. And then for a cold pull, we do the cold pull for our Pilsner. Most for our beers, actually, for IPAs, we do similar process. For our cold pour at 83 degrees, we still want to extract some bitterness from our process, from our recipe. We're adding around 5 to 6 grams of Nelson Saff, Riwaka, and Motueka. And then, we whirlpool for 10 minutes. Stand it for another 10 minutes.
This is quite an aromatic Pilsner then.
So it's very aromatic. You could experience probably over the last few days here. So yeah, it's quite punchy. But yeah, we wanted to focus on aroma because for me, if you call somebody something New Zealand Pilsner, the New Zealand Pilsners have to shine through. Throughout designing that beer, I didn't think about that much balance. I just wanted to focus on the best extraction of New Zealand hops, and then I was dialing down a little bit towards the balance and stuff like that. But that was my initial approach. I focused more on the hops to pop. So
how does the Nelson Sauvin, Motueka, Riwaka that you select for or you use in the lager compare to the way you also think about some of those same varieties in more expressive, ale styles like, hazy IPA, for example, because there, we think about Nelson, and yes, you can use Nelson in lots of West Coast, clear IPA, but, it is mostly some of these hops, because they are so punchy and powerful, they tend to be layered into some of these more residually sweet hazy IPAs more than they are in some of the leaner IPAs. So, does that impact the way that you choose where you source some of these from or select them?
Oh yeah, for sure. For our Motueka, that is main hop in our New Zealand Pilsner, we select Motueka that is more classic. We tried.
What does classic mean?
Classic Motueka for me is mojito. Mojito aroma, crush lime, limey, zesty kind of flavor and aroma. So that's what I'm focusing on selecting hops. That's what I've been doing here for the last few days, focusing to find these hops. So that's our base hop. We use 50% of the whole total.
Is there a place you really like to get them from?
We're getting them from New Zealand Hops. They gave us 5 different lots, and I think I selected a pretty good one that goes well for our New Zealand Pilsner. For our other beers, we use Motueka as a supporting hops, not as a main one. In New Zealand Pilsner is the main hop. For our hazies is supporting hops for some other bigger ones. So we're doing a little bit opposite things to a New Zealand Pilsner versus IPA, I would say.
If you're choosing the Motueka for an IPA, less classic, is there something else you look for in it?
Some like the lots that we had on the table, they were like actually surprisingly quite tropical as well, like towards like a passion fruit. Some of them, they had a green bell pepper kind of notes. Some of them, they're like more towards like a zesty kind of, but without that minty dimension. So yeah, they're quite different Motueka, surprisingly different Motueka coming from this harvest. So everybody, I guess that's why people like brewers from around the world coming here to select what works for them. Selecting Motueka, I was focusing what works the best for that particular beer. Not thinking much about IPAs and hazies or West Coast and stuff, because we use Motueka. If we use it as a supporting hops, not as a main singer. For those beers like hazy IPA or West Coast IPA, focusing on New Zealand hops, we use a much more heavier amount of Nectaron and Nelson Saff, and then Motueka and Riwaka as supporting hops. While in New Zealand Pilsner, we focus to build the beer around Motueka, and then we use Nelson Saff and Riwaka, which are like super powerful hops in my opinion, as a supporting hops. Because in my opinion, it's very easy to overpower other hops with Riwaka in particular.
Pavel Lewandowski of Mount Brewing. Good stuff on brewing New Zealand Pilsner there in the number 6, the most downloaded spot. In the number 5 spot, we go to Brooklyn, New York. Josh Penny, head brewer for Threes, and we are talking about making IPA with lager yeast.
I mean, I almost prefer hoppy beers that are made with lager yeast over Chico, just for the minimal ester production. There's something that happens between hop interactions with lager yeast where those sulfur compounds combine with, I don't know if it's the polyphenols or what, but they get fruitier over time almost.
Interesting.
And like they really do pop after like a few weeks, like they're as fresh as can be. Yeah, so that was kind of like the most immediate like thing. I was like, I want to do this now. And they're like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
That makes it easy for us too. Like we just have 2 yeast strains going. And I guess the other change too was just what hazy yeast we were using. So they were using, this might be wrong. It could be White Labs. I forget which one it was, but I brought an Imperial A38 juice because that's what I knew. And that's what I really liked. And I liked what it brought to hazy beer. It always, especially in double IPAs that were hazy, it always had this hop ice cream quality to it, especially if it finished in this like 4 to 5 Plato range. Which
hop ice cream, you're the second Brooklyn brewer in the last 2 days that has used the ice cream metaphor to describe hazy IPA and double IPA. I don't know what it is out here, but
it's not I mean, I had experienced this out west, so it's like, it's funny that someone else from here would say that, but
it was Ben from Test, where that was one of his big metaphors.
That makes sense. It's not a sweetness. It's this textural thing. It's this like, it's hard to describe without it like sounding like a sweet thing, but it's not a sweet thing.
Right.
It just exists. I don't know what it is. It's cloudy. It's like pillow. Right. It's like a cotton candy sort of thing. I don't know. Yeah.
But A38 juice is that's the thing for you with hazy IPA.
Yeah. And I tried some other ones and I kind of keep going back to the A38. I like how it performs. They have a newer one that's out that's a variation of it that doesn't clump as much. So it's a little bit easier to see under a microscope. Because that's very important.
Checking your
viability and your density. So, but this last round of, again, kind of talking about the competition stuff, we had excellent fermentations, and just in my experience, it's like A38 can be a little unwieldy. Like we sometimes don't know where it's going to finish. Sometimes it over attenuates, sometimes it under attenuates, sometimes it blows out all over the place. For whatever reason, all 4 of these hazy beers that we're entering were just like perfect fermentations. They didn't blow out all over the place, and they had like great density and viability the whole time. So I guess kind of a long-winded answer was the yeast is what changed the most.
Yeah. How did you, how did you manage, say like the flavor transition there? If these are some beers that people have some expectations around now, we say that these are, taproom beers. And so everyone, it's not like people are going to have like their canonical version of this and be
a flavor
directly cross comparing this. But and as as brewers have said, I think it was Joe from Pine House, like no one's ever complained when you make a beer better. And so in that sense, was there any process of transition for those, or you just go for it?
A little bit. The reason for any changes is never usually let's completely redo this, because then you're just making a different beer. So just call it something else. The whole point is like these subtle tweaks. And I really kind of learned that at Highland Park about, we would brew Timbo every 2 to 3 weeks, and there's always something a little bit different that we might change. Not a big change at all. It would be, let's reduce the sulfate. Let's, experiment with like, the space between dry hops or something like that. It's like all the ingredients are still staying the same, but we're just experimenting on our side with effective use of what we already have going.
Right.
Getting the most out of it. When you don't need it anymore, get rid of it. And so like dry hops did change a little bit here, because I like how it all kind of lines up for yeast management when you can be brewing a beer with 3470 that's going to be getting a dry hop. That if it's Gen 2 or later, about 6 days into fermentation, it's going to be ready to harvest. So you can plan your brew schedule out that way months in advance. You have some leeway both ways too. So if you do need to wait another day, it's going to be fine. There was never, they weren't, maybe at some point they were dry hopping during active fermentation, but we're not doing that here. I don't personally like it. So there was no crazy change like that, but
a lot more in the original episode. You should go back and take a listen to that one for more. That was number 5, Josh Penny of Threes. And the number 4 spot, episode 400, craft beer vibe check with my friend Neil Fisher of WeldWorks. But before that, when it comes to packaging your brew, think Heart Print, the original and digital can printing. With 3 locations across North America, the Heart Print team has your back from concept to can. Count on fast turnarounds, no minimums, graphic design support, and rock-solid can quality. All on 100% infinitely recyclable cans. Get 10% off your first can order when you mention the Craft Beer Brewing Podcast. Open an account at heartprint.com. That's HART print.com, or email info@heartprint.com for details. And Brightly Software, a Siemens company, partners with organizations at every stage of their asset lifecycle journey. Brightly is a complete asset management and operations software that enhances organizational sustainability, compliance, and efficiency through data-driven decision-making. Streamline maintenance, simplify capital planning, and optimize resources with solutions uniquely designed to support long-term goals. Learn more at brightlysoftware.com. Also, here's a toast worth raising your glass to. Back in 2016, UNESCO gave Belgian beer culture a huge shout-out, naming it an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Fast forward to 2026, and Visit Flanders is celebrating 10 years of that honor, a whole decade of raising glasses to the creativity, craftsmanship, and community that make Belgian beer legendary. Now, Flanders might be small, but when it comes to beer, it's a giant. You can find over 3,000 unique beers, from classic Trappist ales to funky new experiments. If you love beer, Belgium's got something with your name on it. Come to Flanders in 2026 to celebrate the 10th anniversary of UNESCO recognition and drink in the Belgian beer culture. Now, Neil Fisher, WeldWorks. Should you start a craft brewery? The default answers should probably be no. Should you? No. but.
Right. and I think if all of us just, heeded that, okay, this is the most sensible thing to do, no brewery would open. There's
no business would open,
business,
Neil.
True.
Because
no
they're
small
all
business, no.
Every act of entrepreneurialism is an act of optimism,
Absolutely.
right? You have to be an optimist. You have to think that tomorrow is going to be better than today.
And I think that resonates so much with like our WeldWorks' story, because the same was true in 2015, 2014, when we started talking about opening a brewery. It was opening in Greeley, Greeley, Colorado. For those not in Colorado, just a very different place than Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, the Front Range as a whole, obviously Western Slope. And not to say that we don't love those areas, but there was a lot of really skepticism that you could, create a successful brand based in Greeley, and making beer that would sell not just to the rest of the state, but maybe the rest of the country. And I think, that if everyone that kind of gave me advice, if I listened to all that, we absolutely would never have opened, and certainly not in, called ourselves WeldWorks either, and kind of homage to our area. And I think I've seen, like you said, if everyone were to just, take the most solid, sound advice, it'd be to never take these kinds of risks.
I don't know and again, we're going way, way back now to, 2014, but I created an infographic for that first issue of the magazine. And because even then, even in 2013, early 2014, there was a lot of talk, a lot of chatter out there that craft beer was already too big, that the growth phase was over, that there was no room for any other breweries, that the bubble was going to burst. This was the end of growth, and that why would anyone start another brewery? When we launched craft beer and brewing, that was a prevailing narrative. Now, maybe there is just, an inbuilt sky is falling kind of nature to the kinds of folks that there's an optimism, but also, an inbuilt pessimism that goes along with that. And everyone was convinced that it was so good that it couldn't last forever, that, that the other shoe had to drop. But it's grown like 300% from that.
And I think
even more than that, even.
And even now, I think the resounding sentiment is that there's just no growth to be had. And meanwhile, we've not had a year without growth since our opening. Even last year, even 2023, we had, much more modest growth than in the past, but over 7 to 10% over the last 2 years, and still growth on the horizon as of today. And I think that's the hardest part is like the Brewery Accelerator. What an amazing opportunity to learn about, should I open a brewery or a distillery, or find out the resources I need. I think anybody that is going to make those kinds of investments into the time to learn that, I think it just demonstrates that if you're passionate and you can find the resources you need, you can be successful even when maybe the industry as a whole is not growing like it was 10 years ago. And I think that's the hardest part right now is I think you're right. I think we're all getting kind of fatigued by the headlines of just like, is craft beer done? And I can't say for sure for everyone. I can say definitively for a good number that it's far from that. There's still some optimism and growth.
Great perspective from my friend Neil Fisher of WeldWorks in the number 4 spot. Our third most downloaded episode this year was our Colorado IPA Roundtable with Phil Joyce of Amalgam, Jake Gardner of Westbound and Down, and Brian Hutchinson from Cannonball Creek. Take a lesson.
So if there were no competitions, we would still use 3470 specifically for certain applications where I think it, especially with yeast that are more, where the sulfur-derived compounds are more of their forte. I think, so Simcoe heavy beers can be a great example. And that doesn't mean, Simcoe is our favorite hop on both yeast selections. It's the hop we use the most of regardless. But I think when you think of hops, specifically like Citra, right, is just a great hop, period. Use it everywhere. Everyone does use it everywhere. It's no coincidence. It has the most acreage. But like Mosaic and Simcoe have this, and Simcoe specifically had this high amount of sulfur compound aromatics that I think can be better expressed through kind of bound thiol opportunities with 3470, but also just with the clean nature that lager yeast presents. So
bound thiol opportunities with 3470. What does that mean, Jake?
So, we have, I'm not going to try to be on this podcast to be the thiol expert. You can just read Scott Janis's shit on that. But I will say that, like Citra is kind of so liked generally for its high amount of unbound or free thiol potential, whereas other hops have a lot of thiol compounds that need either a mechanical action from heat that then need a thiolized yeast, which is now a term people like, but 3470 has a partial allele and has more ability to use thiols than Chico. Regardless, I think we think about 3470 as like, are we trying to push these highly tropical thiol compounds, or are we trying to lean more into like what we sometimes describe as like pellet character? Like, do we want what we smell in the bag in the beer? If so, generally, I think that's a Chico decision. If you have hops that are kind of like more OG heavy generally, or have more of these sulfur compounds, then I think unlocking those through things like 3470 selection can be a better choice. A lot of experimentation, a lot of hop combinations, but that's how we think of it. And then if it's packaging competition, then 3470 and its own ability to create sulfur, I think creates an incredible opportunity for longevity and hop character, as well as, I have been pretty vocal on some of your podcasts and video stuff on that. I think thiolized yeast can come off as incredibly one-dimensional. That being said, those flavors have unbelievable longevity. I mean, it's like you can age them and get all the other oxidized characters, and that thiolized character that you're associating with a big tropical fruit just stays the whole time. And again, in a packaging competition, or just, maybe the packaging competition is you're making beer that's can be warm stored and sold around the country. That's still a packaging competition.
Good point.
And people can tie into that anchor flavor. Big opportunity there. So we think about all those things. That was a long rambling answer because I had a lot of ideas, but generally still Team Chico, because I think expressing the hop flavors that we select is ultimately like what I find more attractive. I think it's what our team is more excited about, but I think both have merit.
So many interesting perspectives from award-winning brewers in that one, in the number 3 spot. For number 2, we go back to New Zealand and Pete Gillespie of Garage Project talking about that special magic that the New Zealand hops are and their way of channeling it.
But the thing is with that beer, we've never changed the recipe. And look, occasionally we've fiddled with other recipes, but Pernicious Weed has stayed identical for 14 years.
Huh.
But the beer we're drinking now is so radically different to how it tasted before. And the reason for that is entirely the hops and the way that the way they're being grown, but particularly the way that they are being picked. And this is the thing. I mean, I don't know if you want to
So the recipe is exactly the same.
The recipe's the same, but we have...
Hop addition timing is all the same?
Everything is, all exactly the same. The only change is the hops that we source to brew it. And it's taken it from being...
How they're grown, when they're picked.
Particularly when they're picked.
Okay.
I think that, and we can chat about that in a minute, but that has to be the number one thing that distinguishes the way hops taste. It's fascinating. But Pernicious Weed used to be, intense grapefruit, with that kind of like weedy back note.
Right.
And now we're getting masses of, delicious tropical, sometimes it's a bit passion fruit, mango, papaya, and it's no change to the recipe. It's simply that the change in the hops has kept it contemporary. It's made it more contemporary, which I think is fascinating, eh?
That is fascinating.
A bit lazy for me. I've done bugger all, but it's...
Well, you could say that, but it just means you've got to spend more time rolling around here at hop selection time.
Yeah.
And then, but then also working directly with growers to get what you want and get those picked at the right times. And also helping to understand what that is.
Yeah.
Being able, because now you're having to work with growers and track exactly how that looks on a day-to-day basis in this harvest window to say, hey, this is, if this hangs for another day or two, it's going to develop more of this. Like even building that kind of knowledge base has been something that has to then, there's had to be a lot of work put into that over the last 10 years.
It's also, I find it really stimulating. I mean, I remember when I brewed in the UK, we would actually do hop selection back then. So when I was at Breakspears and then at Hepworth and Co., they would go not to the farmers, but to, like a hop merchant in Kent. Sure. And they would come out from the back with these, have you ever seen those beautiful little cubes wrapped up in purple paper? Why is it purple paper? With a little brass pin holding it together, almost like kind of origami. It's like something you get in Japan, but it's not. This is Kent. And you'd unwrap these little kind of like paper parcels, and inside would be the whole cone hops, and you'd inspect them and rub them and really get amongst it and select your hops based on that. I mean, that was a wonderful experience to have. I then moved back to Australia, and then suddenly that connection was just gone. It was gone. A bag would turn up, like a foil bag, and at that time as well, if you managed to track down some mosaic, you're like, oh my God, high five, we've got mosaic. There was no talk about where it came from. You certainly weren't selecting it. You just managed to lay your hands on a hop. And I mean, look, it was still wonderful, but losing that connection is sad, I think. I mean, we're in a winery here. I'm always slightly envious, and this is a very rare thing because I'm not really envious of winemakers at all. But they're surrounded by the thing that, the base ingredient for their product. And that is incredible to have that connection.
Tells the story immediately. You get to see the story in action if you're a customer here.
Absolutely. And the care and attention that you can have, and just the control as the maker of the wine to be able to have your ingredient on site as well. There are very few breweries who've managed to pull that off. I think there's one I know of in Australia, in Tasmania. And I'm just having a senior moment. I'll come back to that one.
Sure. But the number of estate breweries in the world is very, very low.
Very small. And also because we want hops from all around the world. We've all got ADHD. We all want the colorful, shiny things.
And there are very specific places where hops grow well
absolutely.
and become a viable crop.
Yep.
The agronomics work and all of that. And,
yeah, totally. So for me, being able to reconnect with farmers, to be in the fields with them when they're picking their hops, to understand what they're trying to do, their motivations. And look, we've been incredibly lucky to have such a close relationship with Freestyle in New Zealand. It's made a huge difference. I love it. I always find if my energy levels are dropping slightly, at the beginning of a year, you've done Christmas, it's huge, it's like, another year, here we go. And then harvest comes around and it tops you right back up again. Your little batteries all full after this. I love it.
Pete is a force of nature and a joy to talk to. In the #1 spot, the most downloaded episode of the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast this year. Probably no surprise to regular listeners that for this one, we go to Vermont, Sean Hill of Hill Farmstead, a conversation that I'd been wanting to have for a number of years of the podcast, and it finally came to fruition with some truly unique and special viewpoints, some opinions, some perspective on brewing that only Sean could provide. Here's a small snippet. Go back to the original episode and listen to more. Listen to the entire thing. But here's a quick clip.
Tasting that first batch of beer out of the fermenter, I think it was the first time that, this sort of like more chloride informed soft water profile with Conan yeast. At that time I was getting yeast from John the alchemist, and then oats, and then raw 2-row, et cetera, and then really kind of this hop profile that was inspired by Pliny the Elder, Simcoe, Chinook, Centennial, and a little bit of Cascade. I just remember like the hair on my arm standing up, like when I got to the end of fermentation and was about to dry up the beer, it was just so fruity and delicious. And I'd never tasted anything like it. And it still has this very significant flavor imprint in my mind that I'll never be able to shake.
And so your language for it is still American Pale Ale, even though it's pretty, fairly prototypical for what we would now consider New England. There isn't, although at the same time, the hop combination is definitely American, and so it ends up being this thing that triangulates between these, then texturally New England and hop character wise, maybe a little bit more, West Coast or American.
Yeah. I mean, and the majority of my hoppy beers have discernible bitterness. I think beers should have bitterness.
Sure.
I think Edward was maybe, I don't know. You can ask other people that you interview. I think it was, at least for anyone that had it during that time, that it was an inspiration and maybe a bit of a predecessor to what became New England IPA, which would have used London 3, but would typically have very low bitterness, if any, just Whirlpool editions and huge dry hops, and they seem to finish a bit sweet. I might dare to say, by my taste, under attenuated, but it's my opinion.
I think there is a big, broad range of hazy IPA, and it's hard for me to even speak about it as a hegemonious type of thing because there are so many. I think like every beer style, it becomes so big that you now have regional, iterations, influences that take them in all sorts of different directions. And so I think that, that's the cool and interesting thing about it. I agree with you. I enjoy that bitterness. I think some of the best have much more bitterness than people give them credit for, especially those from Monkish or even Fidens for that matter. There's a fair amount of bitterness in there. I think, folks like to not focus on that. And then some people make them too big and too sweet, but that's a whole nother matter. But Edward became this kind of core beer. Obviously you're making it for Vermont, and it had some haze to it, not as this intentional, I'm going to make a hazy beer because no one was just trying to make hazy beer in 2010. In fact, you're probably trying not to make it too hazy. Some polyphenol haze is fine, but, thick and murky was just not a thing for anyone. That was a poor brewing process for a lot of folks, or the way that some other fellow brewers might have looked at it.
Yeah. I had batches that would have more clarity than others, but I think for the most part it was, I was using pre-milled raw Arturo at that point, and I wasn't paying attention to what the protein or the soluble ratio was, and it was just using the same coagulant level every time. But we don't have a filter. It's pretty raw. And it was just also single infusion mash. So I wasn't able to do any temperature rests. And some batches were very, very hazy. And for, I'm going to say 3 full years, I had to defend the way that our beer looked to people when people would come in, or when I was out in public. People would look at it and they'd be like, what is this? I've never seen a hoppy beer that looks like this. And I would hold my finger up to it and you could just kind of see your finger through it. And then that's when I started calling it hazy. I was like, it's just a little haze, it's just unfiltered. And then I would get people to taste it and smell it and they're like, wow, that's delicious. I've never had anything like it. And I'm like, cool, great. And seeing the pendulum swing on that over the last 15 years has just been crazy. There's I think some brewers now almost have a fear around brewing a beer that doesn't have haze. And that has been crazy, going from defending the haze to defending the clarity. So strange. But it just demonstrates the, how quickly perceptions and fixed ideas can change.
And that brings our top 10 episodes of the year to a close with G&D Chiller's 24/7 service and support. Your brewery will never stop. Berkeley Yeast's Dry Tropics London offers their best-selling liquid yeast strain with ease of use of dry yeast. Hit the refresh button on your fruit flavors with the latest additions from Old Orchard. Give your customers a pleasant surprise with Audacia from Indie Hops in your next IPA. Santa Clean PAA Pro from 5 Star Chemicals is tough on beer stone and perfect for everything from kegs to packaging lines. PackTex handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable. Heart Print has your back from concept to can with fast turnarounds and no minimums. Brightly software enhances your data-driven decision-making. And come to Flanders in 2026 to celebrate the 10th anniversary of UNESCO recognition. If you've enjoyed this entire year of podcasts, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, and help support our mission to bring great stories from brewers, great perspectives, great technical know-how, great ingredient inspiration, and all of the things that help you make better beer. And, and in that sense, like I said earlier, I love watching this kind of network of influence that happens in this way that we share information. The thing that scares me the most about it is this idea that somehow we all may be fomenting some sort of global monoculture where everyone brews the same. And so I just want to throw this challenge out to everyone. Take what you listen to here and make it your own. Like everything, you start by copying, but great artists steal. And the most interesting thing that happens is when you go from trying to make something like someone else to understanding how they do it and why they do it, and then figuring out how to do your own thing using some of that perspective and that knowledge you've gained. But that is the coolest thing in the world, and that is what I love seeing happen everywhere around the world that we go visit. Brewers inspired by the way that brewers do things in other places, but they've found their own way to make that process their own, to use their own ingredients, to do it their own way and make something different and put something back out into this broader brewing world. That is the cycle of inspiration that keeps driving us. And I hope that everything that we share out here hits you in that same kind of way. Not so you can make the exact same thing, but so you can understand how they do it and then apply some of those processes, some of those ingredients, some of those techniques to your own brewing and make your own thing. The world should be big and diverse and have lots and lots of different viewpoints, because that's what keeps it interesting. And we're counting on you. Yeah, you listening to this now, you're the one. Do something interesting with this and then share it back with all of us out here in the brewing world. A few thanks before we sign off. I want to thank our editor, Mark Dobroth, who goes through and does the first round edit of every one of these podcasts. He's an unsung member of the team. It doesn't always get that credit, but thank you, Mark, for all the work that you put into cleaning this podcast up for everyone. I know it's you don't realize how much work goes into it, but we do 2 rounds of editing. He does an edit, I come in and do an edit. We make sure that everything is nice and clean for everybody out there. Obviously, Joe Stang has helped produce and set up a number of interviews this year. Trish Fabian, our managing editor, comes in and helps clean stuff up, make sure we get this done when we're supposed to get it done. And then, of course, edits our podcast posts and makes sure that all the sponsor stuff is in the right place and all of those things. And, of course, thanks to the entire Craft Beer and Brewing team. If you subscribe, you may have interacted with our customer service team. If you've come to our events, you've probably interacted with our events team. We've got some awesome folks that really care about the experience that you have. And, it's a lot more people than just me, and it takes all of us pulling in the same direction to share this passion that we have and do this week after week, month after month, issue after issue, event after event. And anyway, have a wonderful year. Thank you for listening to this. Go back and dig in deeper to some of these episodes if you haven't listened to them all. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back in 2026 with even more. Have a great New Year's. Cheers. This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.